In 1889, a crew of railroad workers pushed a track through a remote stretch of high country. The job was routine. Clear rock, lay steel, sleep beside the fire. But the closer they came to a narrow ravine, the more the land felt wrong. Locals warned them never to answer a voice in the dark. That night, a voice called out from beyond the tents, and the men who heard it knew it wasn't one of their own. So, before we continue, I have a quick question for you. If this thing showed up outside your place tonight, what's the first move you would make? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how many of you actually have a real survival plan. Thanks. Now let's keep going. In the summer of 1889, I was 22 and so poor I took any work that offered a bed and 3 meals. That is how I joined the railroad crew, pushing track through the high country between the mesas and the pine hills. The line belonged to a company out of Denver. Our camp sat in a shallow valley where scrub grass grew in thin patches. The air was dry and carried dust into everything. At dawn, the ground held the night's cold, and by noon the sun burned the back of the neck. The wind cut through the tents without slowing. Most days the only sounds were the clank of tools, the snap of orders, and the faraway calls of animals we never saw. There were 20 of us on that stretch. Most were men who had drifted from one job to the next after the war or after bad luck. Our foreman, Briggs, was a broad man with a harsh voice and a face that never softened. He cared about the schedule and the rail. Past that, a man could drink all night for all he cared, as long as he showed up when the whistle sounded. My bunkmate was Eli, a thin fellow with careful hands who had worked telegraph lines before the rails. He kept to himself most days, but talked after dark and watched the edges of camp instead of the fire. Then there was Morgan, big and loud, who laughed often and liked to test his strength against anyone who would answer. Tomas worked the spikes with a steady rhythm and spoke little English, though he understood more than he let on. At the edge of the camp, there was another tent, smaller and set a little apart. An older man named Jonas lived there. He had been hired as a guide and scout. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes never rested. He knew the trails, the dry creek beds, and the weather before it changed. The others said he had spent years trapping and trading with the people who lived farther south. He never confirmed anything, but he listened when the locals spoke. We were there to cut a path through a stretch of land the company called Section 12. On the maps, it was a set of lines and marks. Standing there, it was ridges, canyons, and silent slopes where our noise fell away quickly. We moved forward a little each day, clearing rock, sinking ties, and laying steel. The work left the back sore and the hands split, but I was young and thought the ache meant I was earning my place. The first weeks passed in a rhythm. Wake before dawn, swallow coffee and beans, march out to the line, swing hammers until the light fades, then return to camp and eat again. Some men played cards until late. Others fell onto their bunks, barely able to pull off their boots. At night, the fire threw a small circle of light, and beyond it, the ground and hills disappeared into darkness. The first sign that our days were not going to remain simple came with a group of local men who arrived near sunset one evening. There were 3 of them on horseback, wrapped in worn blankets despite the dry heat. Their faces were lined and serious. They stopped just beyond the circle of the camp and waited without calling out. Briggs stepped forward to meet them. He folded his arms and asked what they wanted. They did not answer at once. Instead, the oldest of them looked past him, over the camp, along the line of tents and tools, up toward the hills where the rails would soon cut. His eyes stayed on the rocky ridge that rose to the east. Jonas came up beside Briggs and spoke to the men in their own language. Their shoulders eased a little when they heard him. They talked for a while in low voices. The rest of us drifted closer, pretending not to listen. Morgan muttered that they probably wanted payment. One of the others guessed they were hunting. None of us were right. After a time, Jonas turned back to Briggs with a tight look on his face. He said the men were from a settlement beyond the hills. They had seen the line we were cutting and had come to warn us about crossing a ravine ahead. It was not about land rights or hunting grounds. It was about something else, something that moved through that place after dark. Briggs snorted and said the company owned the right of way and no ravine was going to slow us down. Jonas did not argue, but he kept his gaze on the older rider. The man spoke again, his voice low and steady, his eyes never leaving Jonas. Jonas listened, then translated. They said there were places where a boundary in the world was weak, where certain things walked that were not meant to be seen. The ravine ahead was one of those places. The men did not give it a name we could easily say. When Jonas tried to explain it in our words, he spoke slowly. He said it was once a person who had broken a grave promise and had become something else, something that wore shapes that did not belong to it and fed on fear and blood. He said it could copy the sound of a voice, but never the way a soul sat behind it. Most of the crew shifted or looked away when they heard that. Some laughed under their breath. Morgan said he had no fear of ghost stories. Briggs grew impatient and told Jonas to tell them we would be careful and keep moving. The old rider listened to the answer, and his jaw tightened. He looked past us again toward the ridge, and his eyes held a deep, tired worry. Before they left, the old man spoke again, and Jonas translated his last words. If we had to cross that ravine, we would never answer a voice we heard in the dark unless we could see the speaker clearly. We should never follow footsteps that did not belong to any man in our camp. And if someone came back from the shadows looking wrong in a way we could not explain, we should remember that not everything that wore a man's body was still human. After the riders turned and left, the camp filled with restless talk. Some scoffed and called it superstition. Others kept quiet and watched the ridge as the last of the light drained away. I pretended not to care, but the old man's eyes stayed with me as I lay on my bunk that night. His warning stayed in my thoughts, and I could not stop thinking about it. The next morning, when the whistle blew and we marched towards Section 12, I found myself counting the men in our line more often than usual. I told myself it was only a habit. Still, every time I finished, I checked again. The land changed as we moved toward the stretch the riders had warned about. The scrub thinned out, and the soil turned a dull gray. The air felt heavier, though the sky stayed clear, and the wind did not change. Conversation along the line faded. Hammers still rose and fell, but the calls between crews grew shorter. By midday, we reached a shallow cut in the ground. It ran across our path and narrowed into a deeper split to the east. Jonas walked ahead, hands on his hips, studying the lay of the land. Briggs joined him. They stood together for a time, both staring toward the darker notch that marked the ravine. "We can bridge most of this easily," Briggs said when we caught up. "That deeper part will take some doing, but nothing new." Jonas did not answer at once. His gaze followed the split in the earth where shadows already gathered. He asked for a day to walk the rim before we set plans. Briggs swore, then agreed. A broken leg would cost more than a day. We set up a small work camp near the edge of the shallow cut. The tents went up. The cook dug a fire pit, and men hauled crates from the wagons. Even Morgan was quiet. Every so often, someone looked toward the dark line of the ravine and then dropped their eyes. Near sunset, Jonas took a lantern and a rifle and told Briggs he was going to circle the ravine. Briggs told him to be back before full dark. Jonas nodded and set off alone, his steps steady. After supper, most of us gathered around the fire. The smell of beans and coffee hung in the air. Eli sat near me, shoulders hunched, turning a tin cup in his hands. His eyes kept sliding to the edge of the light. "You heard what they said," he murmured. "About that thing that wears people." I nodded. Everyone had heard the warning, and no one had forgotten it. "I used to run lines through the country with stories," he said. "In the end, there was always a man or an animal. Still, this place feels off." Morgan heard him and snorted. "Every patch of dirt has a tale. Folks need something to blame when things go wrong." Tomas sat on a crate with his plate in his lap and watched the circle. His eyes moved from face to face, then to the shadows, matching each voice to a body. I had started doing the same. The night cooled fast after the sun sank. The stars were sharp overhead. The fire's glow looked smaller than it had at the last camp. Talk thinned out. Men drifted away to their tents until only a few of us remained. Briggs checked his pocket watch and frowned. Jonas was not back. He stood, took a spare lantern, and told 3 men to come with him. Eli stepped forward at once. Briggs pointed at me and Morgan, and we fell in behind. We left camp and walked toward the ravine. The lantern light shook with each step and threw moving shapes on the ground. The sound of the camp faded behind us. The ground dipped and loose stones shifted under our boots. We heard the ravine before we reached it. A faint rush rose from below where a thin thread of water moved over stone. The air near the edge cooled. Briggs raised his hand, and we stopped. "Jonas," he called. His voice carried along the rim and dropped into the cut. No answer came. We moved along the edge, keeping a good distance from the drop. The lanterns threw weak light on the opposite wall, where pale stone rose in an uneven line. In some spots, the rock pushed out. In others, it fell away into a deeper shadow. After a time, Eli pointed. "There," he said. Ahead, near the edge, the ground was disturbed. A set of boot prints crossed the dust and gravel. One sole was worn unevenly at the heel. Jonas walked with a slight turn of his foot. I saw the same angle in the marks. They led toward a narrow outcrop that stood over the ravine. We followed them. The prints ended at the outcrop. Beyond it, the rock dropped away. When I stepped closer and lifted my lantern, I saw a narrow ledge below, just wide enough for a man. Fresh scuffs on the stone showed where boots had passed. Briggs swore. Damn fool climbed down. Eli stared into the dark. Why would he do that alone? No one answered. We listened. The slow trickle of water echoed faintly. Now and then a small stone shifted as the ground settled. Nothing else. Briggs raised his voice. Jonas, answer if you hear me. For a moment, there was only the sound from below. Then a voice rose from the ravine. I hear you, it called. It was Jonas's voice. The words were clear, but something in them was wrong. The tone was close, almost exact, yet it fell flat in a way I had never heard from him. The pauses landed in the wrong places. The breath behind the words did not match the climb he would have made. Briggs did not notice. His shoulders eased. Where are you? He shouted. You hurt. Down here, the voice answered. Follow the ledge. It is safe. The last sentence pulled every thought tight in my head. Jonas never spoke that way. He would have told us to stay put until he reached us, or until daylight. The words now had no caution in them. Eli moved closer. That isn't right, he whispered. My mouth was dry. The old writer's warning about voices in the dark came back in full. My mind tried to find a simple reason for the strange sound, but nothing fit. Briggs stepped toward the edge. We're coming down, he called. I grabbed his arm. Wait, I said. My voice shook. We can't see him. Briggs turned on me. You want to leave him down there? He would not call us along a ledge in the dark, I said. He is careful. You know that. Morgan shifted, caught between us and the drop. Eli stood still, jaw tight. The air near the ravine felt colder. The lantern light did not seem to reach far. Again, the voice rose from below. Hurry, it said. It is not safe to wait. The words were right, but there was no fear in them, only steady pressure. I could not explain the wrongness, but I trusted it more than the sound of that familiar voice. Briggs pulled his arm free and leaned over the edge, raising his lantern. The light fell across the upper part of the ravine wall, but revealed nothing below the ledge. The angle was too steep. The darkness swallowed the beam almost immediately. We don't leave a man out here, Briggs said. He wouldn't leave us. Eli stepped closer, voice low. Something's off. Listen to it again. Briggs opened his mouth to answer when the voice rose once more from the ravine. Come down, it said. I hurt my leg. The words were spaced without feeling. Jonas always spoke in a rough, steady tone, but this carried no strain. If he truly hurt himself, his breath would have caught. His voice would have shaken. Instead, it dropped each word without weight. I heard a small scrape on the rock below. It was soft and quick, as if something had shifted its footing. Morgan tightened his grip on his lantern. Briggs hesitated. His jaw moved as he thought, eyes fixed on the gap. The moment stretched. The quiet pressed in. Then he stepped back. Fine, he said. We hold until first light. If he's stuck, we'll get him out when we can see. A breath left my chest that I had not realized I was holding. Eli nodded once, relieved but still tense. Morgan breathed out loud enough to hear. We turned to head back toward camp when another sound drifted up from the ravine. It was faint at first, then grew clearer. Footsteps. They were light, uneven, and close to the wall, as if someone climbed upward. Each step landed with a quick scrape of stone. Then, after a few beats, the sound stopped. Briggs turned sharply. His lantern swung back toward the ledge. Jonas, he called again. Silence followed. We stood still. The night air settled into a cold that crept through my coat. Eli stepped near me and whispered, There's nothing down there. Morgan squinted into the ravine. Maybe he's making his way up. But even he did not sound convinced. We waited for another moment. Nothing moved. No voice answered. No more footsteps scraped the stone. The ravine returned to quiet except for the soft trickle of water deeper below. Briggs motioned for us to follow and kept the group tight together on the walk back. No one spoke on the return. The lanterns bobbed through the dark, their glow fragile against the emptiness around us. When we reached the outer tents, most of the men were awake. The search had unsettled them. They watched us approach, faces tense. Briggs told them Jonas had gone down the ravine, and we would wait until daylight to mount a proper rescue. Some men muttered concern. Others looked toward the direction of the ravine with dread. The fire was still burning low, but no one sat around it. Even its warmth felt thin. The night pressed in at the edges of the camp. I glanced at the shadows between the tents and felt the same unease from the ledge. Eli pulled me aside. "That wasn't him," he whispered. "You know it wasn't." I rubbed my hands together and nodded. "I know," he swallowed. "If something else is out there, we shouldn't be out alone tonight." "We won't," I said. "Stay close to me." Briggs walked the edges to check the camp. When he passed near us, I asked, "You think he's hurt badly?" He kept his eyes ahead. "We'll know in the morning." I could tell he wasn't sure. We turned in soon after, though few slept easily. I lay on my bunk listening to the wind brushing the tent walls. Every sound made me alert. Now and then I thought I heard slow steps outside, but whenever I held my breath to listen, nothing followed. At some point, I drifted off, though lightly. The darkness inside the tent broke when a faint glow came through the fabric. I thought dawn had come early, but the light wasn't warm. It flickered slightly like a lantern flame. I pushed myself up and listened. Outside, a single voice called out. "Briggs," it said. The tone froze me. It sounded like Jonas, but in the same flat way as before. No urgency, no tiredness, only a steady, controlled sound that carried through the cold air. I reached over and shook Eli awake. He stirred, confused, until the voice came again. "Briggs." Eli stiffened instantly. "That isn't him." Another voice rose from a nearby tent. Someone else had heard it. A lantern snapped open. Then another. A pair of boots struck the ground. Briggs stepped out of his tent holding a lantern. The flame shook slightly in his hand. He looked around the camp, scanning for the source. The voice came for a third time. "Briggs, come here." It sounded close now. Not from the ravine, not from the dark behind the fire pit. Instead, it came from somewhere between the tents. Men froze where they stood. No one answered. Briggs raised his lantern and edged forward. I stepped out of my tent with Eli beside me. The air felt colder than before. My breath hung in front of me. Morgan came out holding a shovel like a weapon. Briggs stopped near the row of supply crates. "Jonas," he called. "Where are you?" The silence that followed stretched. The lantern showed nothing but tents, crates, and dusty ground. Then a figure stepped into the edge of the light. At first, I thought it was Jonas. The height was close. The stance was similar. But when the figure moved closer, every part of me locked with dread. The arms hung too low. The shoulders were too narrow. The head tilted in a way no person would hold it. The face was almost right, almost. But every feature was slightly stretched, as if pulled into place without understanding how a face should look. The eyes caught the lantern light. They reflected it in a sharp gleam that no human eye made. Eli whispered, "That's not him." The figure stepped forward again, stiff and jerky. Its boots did not strike the ground the way Jonas's had. Each step landed with a slight drag. "Briggs," it said. The voice was Jonas's voice, but the sound had no life in it. It was like hearing a memory repeat itself without the man behind it. Briggs stepped back. Men behind him scrambled away. The figure stopped at the edge of the closest lantern glow. It shifted its weight in a slow, uneven motion. Its eyes fixed on us with no sign of recognition. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but my legs stayed rooted. Then the thing opened its mouth again. "Come here," it said. Briggs raised his lantern higher, as if more light would force the figure to turn into something he recognized. It didn't. The face stayed wrong. The posture stayed wrong. The eyes stayed fixed on him without blinking. Morgan stepped forward, shovel gripped tight. "What in hell is that?" he whispered. Eli pulled me back a little, his breath tight in his throat. Around us, men formed a loose circle, keeping distance from the thing in the light. No one dared move closer. The figure took another step. Its shoulders shifted in a slow, disjointed motion, each movement delayed from the next. It lifted one arm, as if reaching toward Briggs. The sleeve hung off it strangely, as if the limb beneath wasn't the right shape for the fabric. Then the thing spoke again. "It is safe." The words fell flat, exactly the way they had by the ravine. Briggs's face twisted. He finally saw it the way we did. He stepped back fast, nearly stumbling over a crate. "Stay where you are," he ordered, voice shaking despite his attempt to sound steady. The creature stopped. Its arm hovered in midair, then dropped back to its side with a stiff, unnatural motion. It cocked its head, studying us. For a moment, the entire camp went silent. Even the wind seemed to wait. Then, the creature's body twitched. Its legs bent in a way that made several men gasp. It dropped to a lower crouch, limbs placed at angles no human joints could form cleanly. Its head tilted farther, the neck bending as if it had no structure. It shot forward toward the closest tent, skittering across the ground with short, rapid steps. The lantern light caught its limbs and showed for the first time the thinness of them. Skin pale, stretched, pulled tight over shapes that didn't match human bone. Shouts broke out. One man dropped his lantern. Another ran toward the fire pit. Morgan lunged forward, swinging the shovel. It missed as the creature darted behind a tent, moving far faster than before. Briggs yelled for everyone to hold position. No one listened. Men scattered between tents, lanterns jerking wildly. Every shadow looked like a place where the creature might break out again. The shaking in the air grew stronger, fueled by the fast breathing and crunch of boots on gravel. I grabbed Eli's sleeve. "Stay close," I said, forcing my voice steady. He nodded, eyes fixed on the shapes around us. A scream cut through the noise. It came from near the supply crates. A man stumbled backward into the open, clutching his shoulder. Blood ran between his fingers. Behind him, the creature crawled out on all fours, limbs too long, back arched, its head facing forward, but the rest of its body twisted in a conflicting direction, as if it had too many motions to choose from. It rose again to stand. The stolen shape of its face stretched into something close to a grin, but not quite. Briggs raised his lantern and shouted, "Back away from it!" The creature stepped toward the wounded man. Morgan charged again, roaring as he swung the shovel with all his strength. This time, he caught the creature across its left arm. The limb jerked but didn't break. The creature reeled for only a second before turning sharply toward Morgan. It tilted its head again. Then, in that same wrong voice, it said, "Help me." Morgan froze. The words hit like a trick folded in Jonas's tone. The creature took a moment and lunged. It slammed into him with enough force to knock him down. Morgan's lantern cracked against a rock, the flames sputtering out. The darkness in that corner of the camp deepened instantly. Men shouted in chaos. Briggs yelled for weapons. Tomas ran toward the wagons where tools were stored. Several men tried to get between Morgan and the creature. I hesitated only a moment before pulling Eli with me toward Morgan. We forced our way past the tent and reached the clearing. The creature crouched over Morgan, its body blocking the light, moving with rapid jerking motions. Morgan's boots kicked desperately, his voice broke in a panicked cry. Eli grabbed a rock near the fire pit and hurled it. It struck the creature across the back. The creature snapped its head toward us, eyes gleaming as the lantern light caught them again. It paused just long enough for Tomas to arrive with a pickaxe. Tomas swung downward. The metal edge struck the creature's shoulder and bit into the pale skin. A sharp, unnatural sound came from it. Not a scream, not a growl. Something between the two cut short. The creature recoiled and sprang backward faster than our eyes could fully track. It landed near the shadow between two tents and vanished inside it. Several men ran after it, but Briggs shouted for them to stop. "No one splits up," he barked. "Form a line." Morgan groaned and pushed himself up. Blood ran from his forearm where the creature had grabbed him. His breaths came fast. His eyes darted around camp, searching for movement. Eli knelt at his side. "Are you alive?" "Feels like fire on my arm," Morgan muttered. "It tried to pull me." I felt the bones shift. I looked at his wound. The skin was torn in long, narrow streaks. Not claw marks, not teeth. Almost like the pressure of long, thin fingers forced into his flesh. Briggs strode through the group. "We can't stay here tonight," he said. "Everyone, arm yourselves with whatever you've got. Keep lanterns lit." We stay together. He scanned the camp quickly. "Count off." Men shouted numbers. I listened, heart pounding. 19. There had been 20 before Jonas went missing. "One short," I said. Briggs already knew. Eli looked at me. "It's still out here." I nodded, throat tight. "And it's watching." Morgan tried to stand. Tomas helped him up. Briggs pointed toward the fire. "We stay in the open. Light everything we can. Nothing goes out alone." Lanterns were brought in. More wood was thrown on the fire until the flames climbed higher. The shadows pushed back, but only slightly. Everything beyond the circle of tents felt alive. We formed a rough circle around the fire. Weapons raised. A few men tried to calm their breathing. Others muttered prayers. No one sat down. As the minutes stretched, the night seemed to wait with us. The wind did not move through camp anymore. Even the flames bent upward without flickering sideways. Then from somewhere near the outer tents, we heard the quiet sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, very close. The footsteps stopped just outside the reach of the lanterns. Every man in the circle tightened their grip on whatever they held. I scanned the dark gap between two tents, trying to match the sound to a shape, but nothing moved. "Stay sharp," Briggs muttered, barely above a whisper. The steps resumed. This time they circled us at a steady pace, moving around the edge of the camp with intention. Not rushing, not hiding, as if the creature was choosing when to enter the light. Eli leaned toward me. "It's waiting for someone to break." A man on the far side of the circle shifted backward a step. Briggs snapped at him. "Hold the line." The man froze, then nodded. His hands trembled visibly. The footsteps stopped again. Then a voice called out from the darkness. It was Jonas's voice. "Let me in." The voice sounded closer than before, almost at the edge of the firelight, but the tone stayed wrong. Every pause landed at the wrong moment. Every word held the same flat pressure we had heard earlier. The man who had stepped back earlier whispered. It knows his voice too well. Eli's jaw tightened. It's copying what it hears. The voice came again. "Let me in, please." This time, the word please dropped without tension or breath, as if the creature had learned the shape of the word, but not the intent behind it. Briggs closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. When he opened them, his voice was firm. "You're not him. Show yourself or get away from this camp." The night went silent. Then a faint clicking sound echoed near the supply crates. It was sharp and quick, like joints snapping into place. Lanterns were raised in that direction. Nothing showed in the light. Without warning, a shape rushed toward the line. We barely registered it before men swung their tools instinctively. It darted back before anyone landed a hit. Another rush followed from the opposite side. Again, it retreated before reaching us, testing the edges of the circle, searching for a weakness. The men grew restless. Every time it moved, lanterns shook and shadows jumped. The creature stayed just outside reach. It was learning how we reacted. Morgan's arm shook with pain. He pressed a rag to the wound, but the bleeding had slowed. What frightened me more was the look on his face. He kept staring into the dark as if the creature might call his name next. Then we heard it imitate someone else. "Help me," it said, this time in Morgan's voice. The sound cut through every man. It was perfect in tone, but empty of feeling. Morgan's head jerked toward the darkness, his breathing sped up. "That's my voice," he whispered. The creature stepped closer. A dim outline moved behind one of the tents. The head shape was wrong again, tilted too far, bent as if the neck had no limit. It stood still enough that the lanterns finally caught the white of the eyes. Briggs raised his arm. "Hold. No one moves." A moment passed. Then the creature's posture shifted. It leaned forward, and the pale gleam of its eyes brightened. The voice rose again, this time twice in a row, in Morgan's exact tone. "Help me! Help me!" The repetition sounded like mimicry practiced with no timing. The second one overlapped the first, as if it didn't understand rhythm. Briggs gave the order before it finished. "Form tight. Don't let it slip between us." Men shuffled inward. The fire blazed higher. The camp's light thinned the shadow slightly, but the creature stayed just beyond where we could strike. Then something happened that none of us expected. We heard another voice from the dark. "Get away from them." It was Jonas's real voice. Not the flat imitation, not the halting tone. His real voice carried force, breath, and strain. It came from deeper in the dark, farther from the creature's position. Every man froze. Even the creature seemed to hesitate. Briggs stepped forward a few inches. "Jonas, that you?" No answer came at first. Then a sound followed. Boots scuffing the ground, slower and weaker than the creature's frantic movement. "Briggs," Jonas called again, breathing hard. "I'm here." Lanterns swung in every direction. Men shifted, trying to catch a glimpse of him. The fire crackled and spit sparks. Then, a figure limped into the light. It was Jonas, the real Jonas. His face was exhausted, streaked with dirt, eyes sunken, but alert. His coat was torn, his left leg dragged behind him as if injured from a fall. When he reached the edge of the firelight, he shielded his eyes from the brightness. Morgan exhaled, relieved. Tomas lowered his pickaxe slightly, but before anyone moved toward Jonas, he raised a trembling hand. "Don't come closer," he said. Briggs frowned. "You hurt?" "Yes," Jonas said, keeping his distance. "Fell. Took me a long time to climb out." I believed him. His voice carried the roughness and breath that the imitation had never captured. His shoulders rose and fell with exhaustion. His movements were real and strained. But Jonas didn't look at Briggs or any of us next. He looked past us toward the outer tents. "It's not gone," he said. "It followed me up." Briggs turned sharply. The men closest to the edge backed up fast, pulling lanterns toward the clearing. Something moved behind one tent. The canvas bowed inward. A whisper of sound followed. Eli whispered. It was watching him. Jonas swallowed. It wanted me to lead it to you. As his words settled, we saw the shadow shift again. This time, it didn't retreat. It stepped into a clearer view. No disguise now. Its limbs were long, bent, and thin. Its body stretched into a narrow frame that barely looked human. The face was stripped of the false mimic. It was pale, hollow, and wrong. The mouth pulled too wide, the eyes dark with reflected light. The creature lowered itself into a crouch. Then it made a sound that did not resemble speech. A short, sharp burst of breath, and it charged. Briggs shouted, "Hold the line!" The circle tightened. Men braced. The creature hit us like a thrown weight. It slammed into the nearest man, knocking him backward into the fire pit. Sparks exploded upward. The creature sprang away before the flames reached it, darting toward the gap between Tomas and another worker. I swung a hammer at it as it passed. The head of the hammer struck its arm. The impact felt solid, but the creature hardly reacted. It twisted and grabbed the man beside Tomas, yanking him toward the shadows. Briggs lunged forward with a crowbar, hooking it around the creature's shoulder. The creature jerked away, dragging both Briggs and the screaming worker several steps before finally releasing them. Lanterns fell. Light scattered across the ground. The creature stood a few paces away, breathing fast, chest rising in sharp movements. Its eyes darted between each of us, not frightened, measuring. Eli whispered, "It's thinking." "Stay together," Briggs said. "We end this now." The creature straightened. Its body lengthened unnaturally. Then it stepped backward into the dark between the tents. We raised lanterns and tools, waiting. It didn't flee. It waited too. And I realized something unsettling. It wanted us to break formation. It wanted us alone again. Briggs must have sensed the same thing I did, because he didn't let anyone pursue it. He kept his arms out, steadying the men closest to him. "No one leaves the line," he said. "It's trying to pull us apart." Jonas limped closer, keeping to the firelight. His face was tense. "It doesn't fight unless it sees weakness. It waits for confusion." "We're not giving it that," Briggs said. The circle tightened again, though several men still looked toward the dark gap where the creature had disappeared. The fire crackled and sent a short wave of heat across us. Beyond it, the night felt colder than before. Jonas's voice came quiet but clear. "It won't leave. It thinks one of you will fall behind sooner or later." Morgan breathed heavily and wiped sweat from his forehead with his uninjured arm. "We can't stand like this all night." "We have to," Briggs replied. "Until daylight, or until it shows itself in the open." The silence pressed down again. Boots shifted on the dirt. Lantern flames shook from the trembling hands that held them. The creature didn't move. It didn't step into the light. It only lingered where we couldn't see the details. Then, we heard another sound. Breathing. Not human breathing. It came in short, staggered bursts, each one too forceful and too shallow. It circled us from the direction opposite, where it had disappeared. Its pace was slow, deliberate again. A man behind me muttered a prayer under his breath. Another wiped his mouth nervously. Eli leaned close. "It's learning how we react. Every second we give it, it learns more." Instinct told me the same. The creature wasn't mindless. It didn't attack wildly. It tested, waited, and copied. Briggs pointed toward the fire. "We need more light. Get every piece of wood on it." He looked at Morgan. "You stay in the center." Tomas and two others ran quickly to grab planks and broken crates. They fed the fire until flames rose higher and spread more light across the ground. The shadows shrank a little, but the creature stayed just outside them. When the breathing stopped, the quiet felt worse. Jonas's eyes scanned the dark. "It's choosing a direction." "Then we watch every side," Briggs said. We held the circle for several long minutes. My legs ached. My arms burned from gripping the hammer so tightly. Eli shifted his weight, but didn't step away. Nothing moved. No voice came. The silence dragged until each man started doubting his own hearing. Then a voice finally broke it, a voice we hadn't heard before. "Help." It was thin and uneven, like a stranger's voice trying to copy a sound it didn't understand. It didn't belong to Jonas or Morgan. It didn't belong to any man in our camp. It sounded younger, higher, almost like a child calling from a far tent. "No children in this crew," Morgan muttered. That alone chilled every man. Briggs raised his lantern. "You don't listen to that," he said. "None of you move." The voice came again. "Help! I'm stuck." The words hit the camp with a weight, that was worse than any mimicry we'd heard before. It didn't match anyone. It didn't try to. It felt like the creature was trying new sounds, learning new patterns. Tomas swallowed, muscles tense. It's trying different voices, seeing which one makes someone break. I couldn't shake the thought that if even one man moved toward that sound, the creature would be on him instantly. Jonas limped closer to us. Don't speak to it. Don't answer. Just hold. The creature, wherever it was now, went silent again. Men adjusted their stance. Some gripped their tools higher. Others stared into the dark, trying to catch the faintest outline. Then something large moved near the outermost tents. We heard the canvas of a tent shift, then snap, as if something heavy brushed it. Briggs swung his lantern. The light reached the tent for only a moment before something darted past the opening. Not running, climbing. It crawled up the back of the tent in a flash. The canvas sagged under its weight, showing the long stretch of its limbs pushing outward. Men shouted, scrambled backward, nearly breaking formation, but Briggs barked for them to stay put. The tent buckled further. Then the creature shifted again. The outline of its head pressed against the canvas at an unnatural angle. Its eyes made two faint points of reflected light through the fabric. Eli muttered, "It's above us." "Keep the circle," Briggs warned. "It won't jump without a reason." The creature crawled along the ridge pole of the tent, shifting its weight from side to side. Each movement strained the canvas until the seam stretched. It stopped at the peak. Jonas pointed. "It's watching for an opening." Briggs nodded. "Then don't give it one." After a long pause, the creature moved again. This time it crawled downward on the far side of the tent and vanished from view. Every man breathed out at once. Then the tent collapsed. The ridge pole snapped and the canvas folded inward as if crushed by something inside. The sound of tearing cloth filled the camp. Men scattered backward, even though Briggs shouted to hold. I took a step back without meaning to. Eli steadied me with a hand to my shoulder. "We can't go near that," he said. The tent flattened, still shifting slightly, as if something moved underneath the canvas. Morgan called out, "It's trying to confuse us. Keep tight." Then the movement inside stopped completely. No breathing, no shifting, nothing. Lanterns shook as men lifted them higher, expecting the creature to burst from the canvas. But it didn't. Instead, something slower happened. A pale hand pushed up through the top of the collapsed tent. The fingers were long and thin. They spread slowly, testing the air. The creature rose through the torn fabric, shoulder first, head turning last. Its face came into view at the top of the pile, pale and empty, eyes catching the lantern glow with that same cold reflection. Then it stood, full height, out in the open. Every man stumbled backward. Briggs braced himself. Jonas gripped a broken branch like a spear. I pulled Eli behind me instinctively. The creature took a step toward us, a single quiet step, then another. It wasn't testing us anymore. It had decided to fight in full force. Briggs shouted, "Hold." The creature lunged. It moved faster than before. Its limbs hit the ground in quick bursts that were hard to track. It swung its arm and knocked a lantern from a man's hand. The flame burst across the dirt, lighting a streak of dry grass. Jonas shouted, "Don't scatter." But the creature was already in the center of us. Men swung picks, hammers, and boards. Some strikes connected, but the creature's body absorbed them like glancing blows. It snarled without sound. It grabbed Tomas by the collar and hurled him into two men behind him, breaking the circle. That was the opening it wanted. It surged toward the break. Briggs charged in from the side, slamming the crowbar into its ribs. The creature twisted and struck him across the face, knocking him to the ground. Eli yelled my name as the creature turned, its eyes locked on me. For the first time, I felt the full force of its focus. Its head tilted, its limbs folded inward, preparing to spring. I raised my hammer, but I knew I wouldn't stop it alone. Before it leapt, Jonas shouted, "Look at me." The creature froze, head snapping toward Jonas. Jonas stood at the fire pit, holding a burning length of wood from the edge of the flames. His voice was raw. "You want me, not them?" The creature dropped to all fours and lunged at him. Jonas held his ground until the last possible moment. The burning length of wood trembled in his grip, but he didn't step back. The creature leapt with its limbs spread wide, its body stretched into a shape that looked built only for violence. At the final instant, Jonas swung the burning wood upward. The flames met the creature's face and chest with a burst of light. The creature recoiled in midair, twisting violently before landing off balance on its side. A harsh, broken sound came out of it, a sound with no pitch, no pain, only raw reaction. Jonas staggered from the force of the swing. The firelight shook around him. The creature scrambled up faster than anything should have been able to, limbs bending out and then snapping back in as it regained its stance. "Keep hitting it," Briggs shouted, still on the ground, but pushing himself upright. The nearest man surged forward. Tomas, bruised but conscious, dragged himself to his feet and raised his pickaxe. Another man brought down a hammer toward the creature's back. The creature darted away from the blows with sudden jerks, its movements less coordinated now, as if the fire had disrupted whatever calm control it had relied on. It rushed toward the edge of the camp again, trying to find another gap, but the men had closed ranks faster than before. This time they stood shoulder to shoulder, lanterns high, weapons drawn. Eli gripped my arm. "Don't let it slip through us again." Before I could answer, the creature changed directions. It dashed straight toward the fire pit, toward Jonas. Jonas didn't retreat. He raised the burning wood again, drawing on what strength he had left. His injured leg buckled under him, but he refused to fall. His breath came short and sharp. The creature did something we hadn't seen yet. It stopped before reaching him. Not from caution, from recognition. It leaned forward slightly, body rigid, staring at Jonas as if measuring not the fire, but the man holding it. Its chest rose and fell once, slow and deliberate. The firelight reflected off its pale skin in long streaks. Jonas stared back. His voice came out low. "You followed me because I crossed your ground." The creature tilted its head, slow and exact. Jonas adjusted his stance. "You followed me because I lived when you expected me to die down there." His words weren't challenging or taunting. They were realizing. The air around us tightened. Even the fire's crackling felt smaller. Then Jonas said something that stopped every man cold. "You want to finish what you started?" The creature lunged, but Jonas had seen it coming. He sidestepped and brought the burning wood down with all the force he could gather. It struck the creature across the neck and shoulder. A harsh cracking sound echoed through camp. The creature shrieked, not a scream, but a forced exhale that stripped the air from our lungs. Its body writhed, limbs flailing in short bursts. It staggered away from Jonas, its posture collapsing into something uneven and unstable. "Now," Briggs shouted. "Hit it while it's down." The men closest to it surged forward. Hammers struck its back. A spade slammed into its ribs. Someone swung a length of rail tie and caught it across the side of its head. For the first time, the creature struggled to stay upright. I moved in beside Tomas and brought my hammer down on its shoulder. The impact jarred my arms all the way to my spine. The creature dropped to one knee. It tried to rise again. Jonas hobbled forward, grabbed a second length of burning wood from the fire, and thrust it toward the creature's face. The creature recoiled sharply, its limbs scraping the dirt. "It hates the fire," he said. "Keep the flames close." Men gathered every burning scrap from the edges of the pit and moved in. The circle tightened again, not to defend, but to trap. The creature twisted, desperate now. Its movements were losing rhythm, losing control. It swiped at the burning wood, but every time it got near the flames, its body jerked back violently. Morgan stepped forward despite his injury. He held a lantern in his good hand and swung it forward. The creature hissed as the warm light touched its face, stumbling backward into a half-collapsed tent. Tomas rushed in and slammed the pickaxe down. The creature rolled away, skin scraping against canvas and dirt. It tried to stand again, limbs shaking. Jonas pointed toward the fire pit. "Drive it in." Briggs understood at once. "Push it." We moved as a single group for the first time all night. Burning wood, lanterns, and tools forced the creature backward. It clawed at the ground, dragging itself away from the heat. Every man shouted, fear, determination, fury, all of it mixing into one loud wave. The creature twisted with sudden strength, nearly breaking through the line. But Jonas stepped into its path and thrust the burning wood under its jaw. The creature reacted like it had been struck with boiling water. It shrieked again, its limbs spasming. Its body twisted sideways, losing all coordination. Tomas and Morgan pushed from behind. I struck its side again. Men with lanterns closed in, forcing the creature toward the fire pit until its heel slipped into the outer ring of embers. I panicked. For the first time, we saw panic in it. It thrashed, limbs jerking wildly. It tried to climb over the men, but they struck it back each time. The creature's lower leg landed on the edge of the fire pit, skin blistering instantly. Jonas shouted, "Hold it there." We pushed harder. The creature's body writhed against our strikes, but it could no longer decide on a direction to flee. Its limbs clattered against stone and dirt. It writhed like something caught between forms. Briggs stepped in with a rail tie raised high. End it now. He swung down with everything he had. The blow landed on the creature's skull. It collapsed instantly. Its limbs sprawled outward, twitching once, then going still. Silence fell over the camp. The only sound left was the fire crackling and the ragged breaths of 20 exhausted men. I backed up a step, sweat dripping down my face, hands shaking from the force of what we'd done. Eli let out a long breath and leaned his hands on his knees. Morgan wiped blood from his arm and stared at the creature's still body. Is it dead? Jonas limped forward and lowered one of the burning pieces of wood toward the creature's face. The flames lit the hollow eye sockets and the stretched, unnatural shape of its features. The creature did not move. Jonas waited. It still did not react. He nodded once. Yes. Tomas exhaled sharply and sat down in the dirt. Someone else sank to their knees. Briggs dropped the rail tie and braced his hands on his thighs. Nobody cheered. Nobody spoke. For a while, we only stood there, waiting for something to stir again. Nothing did. At last, Briggs looked around the camp. Guard it until morning, he said. No one goes near it alone. He looked at Jonas. And you sit down before you fall over. Jonas gave a tired half smile and lowered himself to a crate near the fire. His leg trembled from the effort. Eli came to stand beside me. We lived, he whispered. I nodded. We did, but I could not look away from the creature's still body. Even dead, it looked like something the world had not meant to hold, and we had no choice but to face whatever morning would bring. We kept every lantern lit until dawn. No one slept. Men rotated in pairs to stand closest to the creature's body, keeping a length of burning wood or a lantern within arm's reach. No one trusted it enough to look away. Even dead, it felt wrong to leave it unguarded. Jonas stayed near the fire, legs stretched out, breathing unevenly. Now and then he looked toward the corpse with a distant, wary look, as if expecting it to move again. Briggs wrapped a torn coat around Jonas's injured leg and told him not to try standing until the sun was high. Jonas didn't argue. The rest of us fixed the worst of the camp's damage. The collapsed tent was set aside. The crates knocked over in the fight were collected. Most of the work was done quietly. Men glanced over their shoulders every few minutes, checking the shadows, even though the creature lay motionless in the open. Morgan sat with his back against a wagon wheel, his injured arm wrapped in strips of clean cloth. His eyes held a tired intensity. Every time someone walked near him, he looked up quickly, only relaxing once he recognized the person. Eli stood beside me, rubbing his hands together despite the heat from the fire. His voice stayed low. We need daylight. I want to see the land. See if anything else moved through here. We'll leave as soon as the sun rises, I told him. That thing followed Jonas for a reason. He said it wasn't random. He didn't expand, and I didn't ask him to. The truth was obvious. Something in that ravine wasn't meant for people to cross. Something had watched him climb out, and it didn't want him reaching us alive. A pale line eventually appeared on the horizon. The first morning light crept across the ridge, pushing the shadows back slowly. Men straightened as the sky shifted. A few sighed silently in relief. When the sun finally rose high enough to light the camp fully, Briggs gathered us. We bury it, he said. Far from here. Jonas shook his head. Don't bury it. Burn it. Nothing else will keep it down. Briggs paused. None of us questioned Jonas after surviving the night. Briggs nodded. Then we burn it. We prepared a pile from broken crates, dry brush, and anything that would catch flame. Men worked quickly and without hesitation. No one wanted the body in camp any longer than necessary. When the pile was ready, 4 men approached the creature. None volunteered, but they didn't refuse either. They wrapped the corpse in what was left of the ruined tent canvas, keeping as much distance as possible. Even dead, the limbs felt unnatural under the fabric, too long and too light, as if the bones inside weren't the right shape. The men lifted the bundled corpse and carried it to the pile with slow, measured steps. Jonas watched every movement carefully. Morgan muttered, "Don't let it touch the ground again." The men set it on top of the stacked wood, stepping back quickly once it was in place. Jonas nodded toward Briggs. "Light it." Briggs handed him a burning branch. Jonas leaned forward, bracing on his good leg, and pressed the flame to the dry wood under the canvas. The fire caught at once. Flame spread across the pile in a growing wave. The canvas shrank and blackened in the heat. The creature's shape curled under the fire, limbs drawing inward, but it didn't move. No sound escaped it. The flames swallowed its outline until only dark, Charred folds remained. We watched in silence. No one spoke until the pile sank under its own embers. Briggs turned to the men. "We're leaving this place today. Pack everything." No one objected. By mid-morning, the camp was broken down. The men worked with a quiet urgency. Even the toughest among us kept glancing toward the ridge and the ravine as if expecting something else to climb out. We moved the wagons and supplies back along the track we'd laid. It wasn't fast progress. Jonas's legs slowed us, and Morgan needed help lifting anything heavy, but no one complained. Being farther from the ravine mattered more than schedule. By afternoon, we'd put several miles between us and the place where the creature had died. The air grew lighter, and the sun warmed the ground differently. Still, the men kept close. No one walked alone. Even the usual chatter didn't return. Briggs called for a halt near a stand of pines. "We camp here tonight," he announced. "No fires after dark. Lanterns only." Men nodded. There was no argument. We set up a smaller, tighter camp. Jonas rested against a tree with his injured leg propped on a bedroll. Eli tended to him and checked the wound carefully. Jonas winced but stayed still. Morgan sat nearby. "You think any others are out there?" he asked Jonas. Jonas didn't look up. "I think that thing was alone. But the land out here has old places. Some are safe. Some aren't. We crossed one that wasn't." Morgan shuddered. "Glad it's dead." Jonas hesitated, then said, "Most people don't kill one. Most never see one long enough to try." That quieted the group. As the sun lowered, the camp settled. Men kept their lanterns ready. I walked the edges with Eli. The pines swayed above us, their branches shifting with a dry rustle. The wind felt familiar again, no heavy weight behind it. Still, we kept watch until the last light faded. Hours passed. Nothing moved. Nothing called out. Nothing circled the tents. Near midnight, I sat with Eli at the edge of camp. The cold crept in again, but this time it was the normal kind, not the hollow chill from the ravine. "You think it's really over?" Eli asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think it ended back there." He nodded silently. We stayed awake until another pair relieved us. The night remained uneventful. When morning broke, brighter and cleaner than the day before, even Briggs let out a long exhale. We continued east, away from Section 12 and everything in it. No man in the crew ever rode back near that ravine, not even Jonas once he healed. The company later reassigned the route. Officials chalked it up to unstable ground and poor terrain. None of them asked for more detail. None of us offered any. A year later, Eli and I parted ways when the line split north. Tomas went home to his family. Morgan left for a telegraph job farther west. Jonas retired from guiding altogether. Briggs took another crew and never spoke of that night again. I stayed on the rails a few more seasons, met new crews, saw new land, but something changed in me after Section 12. I learned to listen for things other men ignored, to watch the dark edges before stepping through them, to trust instincts that came without proof. I never forgot the sound of its voice, or how it tried to wear the shape of a man, or how silence feels when something in the night is choosing who it wants. Sometimes when the light fades just right and the wind dies for a moment, I remember those footsteps circling us in the dark. And every time, I feel the same reminder settle in my chest. Some warnings are not superstition. Some places are not meant to be crossed. And some things die only because the night allows it.